Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Thanks. I was 20 years old when this happened. A sophomore at Cleveland State University, still living at home with my parents in a quiet little suburb just outside the city. Most of my friends had already moved into apartments or dorms, but my mom and dad insisted I stay with them until I finished school. At first, I hated the idea. I craved independence, wanted to stay out late, have friends over whenever I pleased, but the older I got, the more I realized how lucky I was to have parents who loved me enough to worry. That being said, sometimes it felt suffocating. My mom still treated me like her little girl, constantly asking where I was going, when I'd be back, who I'd be with. My dad was more laid back, but he didn't exactly protest when Mom nagged me about my social life. When I met Rachel Morgan in my American Lit class, things changed. Rachel was different. She had this effortless charm about her, the kind that drew people in without them realizing. Long auburn hair, pale green eyes, and a smile that could convince you to follow her into the woods at midnight without asking why. She wasn't from our town. She told me she grew up in St. Louis and had moved here the year before. We became close quickly, bonding over our shared love for books, iced caramel lattes, and oddly enough, collecting dolls. I had never really told many people about that. It felt childish. But Rachel, she loved them too. She wasn't embarrassed. She talked about the design, the craftsmanship, how intricate the faces and clothing could be. For me, it was more nostalgic. I'd had a Barbie collection since I was little, and I couldn't bring myself to let them go. It felt refreshing, meeting someone who got it. One night after class, Rachel asked, "Do you ever hang out with friends outside school? Like sleepovers, movies, stuff like that?" I laughed, a little embarrassed. Honestly, not much. My parents are still kind of strict about me being out. They always want me home before midnight. Rachel tilted her head, smiling. "That's kind of sweet, though. Means they care. But come on, you're in college. You should let loose a little." "I know," I admitted. "I just don't want to fight with them about it." "Then don't tell them." She grinned mischievously. "I'm serious. Come over to my place this weekend. Saturday night. Bring your dolls, I want to meet them. We'll watch movies, eat junk food, maybe drink a little. Nothing crazy, just us girls." I hesitated. My mom's voice was already in my head. "You barely know this girl. Why would you stay overnight?" But Rachel's smile made me say yes. Saturday night came. I packed my 4 favorite dolls in a duffel bag and another with clothes and snacks. Mom eyed the bag suspiciously. "You're sure about this, Emma?" she asked. "You barely know her. I don't like the idea of you sleeping over at some stranger's house." "She's not a stranger, Mom. She's in my lit class. You'd like her if you met her. I'll be back tomorrow morning, I promise." Mom sighed, brushing a strand of hair out of my face. "Text me if anything feels weird, please." "Of course," I said, hugging her before heading out the door. Rachel pulled up in a beat-up blue Corolla. She looked excited, waving me over. "Hop in. You ready for the best night ever?" I slid into the passenger seat. A faint smell of vanilla air freshener mixed with cigarette smoke clung to the car. She reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small bottle. "Shot of Grey Goose?" she teased. I laughed nervously. "It's like 7 o'clock. "Exactly," she said, unscrewing the cap. "We'll pace ourselves." "Come on, live a little," I gave in. One shot turned into 4, and by the time we reached her house, my head was spinning. Her house was on the edge of town, tucked behind a row of oaks. It was old, weathered, the kind of rental you knew college students or transient families cycled through every couple of years. The porch steps creaked as we climbed them. Inside, though, it was immaculate. Everything perfectly arranged, books alphabetized, furniture polished, not a speck of dust in sight. "Wow," I said. "You're way cleaner than me." Rachel laughed. "OCD much, right?" "Can't help it." We sprawled out on the living room rug. She put on Friends while I tried not to slur my words. "You brought them, right?" she asked eagerly, nodding toward my bag. "Yeah," I said, pulling it closer. "But maybe later." "I'm too drunk to even sit up straight," she smirked. "Lightweight, fine. TV first, dolls later." That's the last clear memory I have of that night. When I woke up, I wasn't on the couch anymore. I was lying on cold hardwood, a thin pillow under my head, a scratchy blanket over me. My body ached like I'd been hit by a car. Blinking, I realized I was in a basement. A single bulb dangled overhead, casting sickly yellow light. My duffel bag with my clothes sat beside me. My phone lay on the ground, lifeless in a puddle of dried reddish liquid, but my bag of dolls was gone. I sat up, groaning as pain exploded in my skull. My fingers brushed against rough fabric wrapped tightly around my head. When I pulled them away, they came back sticky with dried blood. "Rachel," I croaked. My voice was weak, raspy. No answer. I forced myself to my feet, climbing the stairs, but when I opened the door, the house was empty. Completely empty. All the books, the furniture, gone. Only the lime green couch and a couple of chairs remained. It was like she had moved out overnight. My heart pounded. None of it made sense. My wallet was still in my bag. If this was about money, she would have taken it. I stumbled outside. The sun was blinding. My head throbbed so hard I thought it might split open. I wandered onto the dirt road, dizzy, until a rusty pickup truck approached. An older couple inside slowed down, concern etched across their faces. "You all right, sweetheart?" the man called out. I shook my head, tears filling my eyes. "I don't even know where I am. I just need to get home." The woman frowned, eyeing the bandage around my head. "You look hurt, honey. You need a hospital." "No," I said quickly. "Please, just take me home. My mom is waiting." They exchanged uneasy glances, but eventually they let me climb into the back seat. "Where to?" the man asked. "Parma," I whispered. "Near Cleveland." As we drove, I asked for the time. 2:44, the woman said kindly. October 15th. My stomach dropped. The sleepover had been scheduled for September 28th. I had been gone for over 2 weeks. I broke into sobs. The woman climbed into the back seat with me, gently unwrapping the bandage on my head. "I used to be a nurse. Let me take a look." When the cloth came away, her eyes widened in horror. "Oh my God." "What?" I begged. "What's wrong?" She covered her mouth, shaking her head. I pulled the rest of the bandage off myself. My scalp was raw, streaked with pink flesh and dried blood. Patches of hair were missing completely. Tiny white maggots writhed in the wounds, chewing through my skin. I screamed. The man slammed the brakes, pulling to the side of the road as his wife sobbed. She scalped you, Rachel." The realization hit like ice water. She hadn't just been collecting dolls. She had been collecting me. I saw it then, my missing dolls. Their perfect hair, their flawless skin, the way Rachel used to study them, describing their parts in detail. I was never her friend. I was her next project. They rushed me to the hospital despite my protests. My parents arrived minutes later, my mother collapsing against me in tears, my father white as a sheet. Doctors swarmed, cleaning the wounds, stitching what they could. Police were called. They searched for Rachel Morgan, but no trace of her existed. No rental history, no driver's license, no class enrollment under that name. Whoever she was, she had vanished. And every night since, when I close my eyes, I swear I can hear her voice whispering just behind me, soft and sweet. The same way she did in class, "You're even prettier now." I never thought much about the people who live next door. You grow up with this idea that neighbors are just fixtures in your life, like trees on your street or the mailboxes lined up in a row. You wave to them when you see them outside. Maybe borrow some sugar now and then, but for the most part you don't dig too deep. I was 24 when all of this happened, and I've never looked at neighbors the same way since. I grew up in a small town in Indiana, where everyone knew everyone else's business. You couldn't sneeze at the gas station without 3 people asking if you had allergies. When I moved to my first apartment alone about an hour north in the city of Bloomington, I thought I'd finally escaped that watchful, gossipy bubble. For the first time, no one cared where I was going at night or if I came home past midnight. The apartment complex wasn't much to look at, just a row of brick buildings with peeling white trim, but it was mine. I worked part-time at a local bookstore while finishing my graduate degree in counseling psychology, so money was tight. The place was quiet, tucked on the edge of a neighborhood with little kids riding bikes in the evenings and old men sitting on porches with beers in hand. When I moved in, my mom gave me that old warning. "You never really know who your neighbors are, Sarah." I brushed it off at the time. It sounded like the kind of cliche moms use when they're nervous about their kids moving out. But I should have listened. My neighbor, the one directly across the hall, was a woman named Melissa Hart. Early 30s, dark hair she wore in messy waves, the kind of pale skin that made her look a little ghostly under the hallway lighting. She had this odd way of pausing whenever you passed her in the hall, like she wanted to say something but was always a beat too late. The first time we met, I had just moved in and was balancing a box of kitchen stuff against my hip while fumbling with the key. "You must be the new girl," she said suddenly, startling me. I turned and saw her leaning against her doorframe, barefoot, wearing an oversized Indiana Hoosiers sweatshirt. Her eyes locked on me with a smile that was friendly, but off somehow. "Yeah, that's me," I laughed nervously. "I'm Sarah, just moved in today." "Melissa," she said. Across the hall, "I notice everything that goes on here." It was meant to be a joke, I think, but the way she said it made my skin prickle. Still, I tried to be polite. We shook hands. She had one of those grips that linger just a little too long, as if she wanted to make sure you remembered it. For the first month, Melissa seemed harmless. She was overly friendly at times, always trying to invite herself into my apartment for coffee, or knocking on my door with excuses, asking if I had a spare onion, or if she could use my Wi-Fi because hers was acting up. "You're a grad student, right?" she asked one evening when I finally let her in. She wandered around my living room like she owned the place, trailing her fingers along my bookshelf. "Yeah, counseling psychology," I said, setting 2 mugs of coffee on the table. "That's so perfect," she said dreamily. "You'll understand people." "You'll understand me. Most people don't." I smiled politely, but something about the way she emphasized that last part unsettled me. She started showing up more frequently after that. She'd text me out of the blue, though I never remembered giving her my number. Sometimes it was harmless things. "Want to grab pizza?" Or "You home? I'm bored." But other times it was unsettling. "I saw you walking back from class." "You didn't see me, but I saw you." "I like your red sweater. You should wear it more." I told myself she was just lonely. Maybe she didn't have many friends. Everyone gets attached differently, right? Things escalated the night she invited me over for dinner. "I'm making lasagna," she told me in the hallway, holding a casserole dish with oven mitts. "You have to come." No excuses. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. Saying no to Melissa always felt harder than it should have, like she'd take it personally. Her apartment was strange. At first glance, it was neat, but too neat. Every magazine stacked in perfect alignment, every pillow squared away. But what unsettled me most were the pictures on the walls. There were framed photographs of me, pictures I knew I hadn't posed for. One of me carrying groceries, another of me walking to my car, even one of me sitting on my balcony reading. Melissa. I froze in her living room. "Where did you get these?" She glanced up from the stove, casual as anything. "Oh, those? I just like photography. You're my muse, Sarah." "My muse?" "Don't be freaked out. It's not creepy. You're just you. You have this light around you. I've never met anyone like you." Her voice was so soft, so sure that for a moment I questioned whether I was overreacting, but deep down I knew this was wrong. "I think I should go," I muttered. No, stay," she insisted, gripping my wrist a little too tightly. "Please, I made this for you." "You'll hurt my feelings." I stayed. Against every instinct, I stayed. After that night, Melissa became unbearable. She started waiting for me outside my door in the mornings, pretending it was a coincidence. She left little notes under my door. "You looked sad today. Want me to come over and cheer you up?" "I dreamt about you last night. We were living together." One time I caught her trying to unlock my door with what looked like a bobby pin. When I shouted, she laughed it off. Oh, silly me, I thought it was my apartment. They all looked the same, right? But I knew better. I called my mom that night. "Mom, I think my neighbor's weird, like really weird. She takes pictures of me. She tries to get into my place." "Sarah, honey, that's not good. You need to set boundaries." "I'm trying, but she doesn't listen." "Then go to the landlord, or the police if you have to." I told myself I'd do it, but I never got the chance. It happened on a Friday night. I came home from a long shift at the bookstore, exhausted. When I opened my apartment door, I immediately noticed something was wrong. The lights were on. The faint smell of lasagna hung in the air. My heart dropped. "Melissa?" I called out, my voice shaking. She stepped out from my bedroom wearing one of my shirts, smiling, surprise. "What the hell are you doing in my apartment?" I demanded. "I just wanted to be here when you got home," she said sweetly. "Don't be mad. I cleaned up for you." I saw then that my laundry had been folded on the couch, my bed made, my personal journal sitting open on the coffee table. "You read my journal? I want to know everything about you," she whispered. I could be you, Sarah. I could take care of you better than anyone else ever will. Something inside me snapped. Get out. Right now. Or I'm calling the cops. Her face darkened. The sweetness drained away. You don't mean that, she hissed. You need me. You'll see. I shoved her toward the door, adrenaline shaking my hands. She finally left, but not before leaning close to my ear and whispering, "If I can't be your neighbor, I'll be you." I barely slept that night. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. At around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of my doorknob rattling. My stomach turned cold. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911. Then the door creaked open. Melissa stood there in the dark, holding something shiny in her hand. A kitchen knife. "Melissa, stop!" I screamed, backing toward the balcony. She stepped closer, eyes wild. "Don't scream. Don't ruin this. I love you, Sarah. We're supposed to be one person. You don't get it yet, but you will." I bolted for the balcony, yanked the door open, and screamed for help into the night air. The commotion woke the neighbors. Lights flicked on. Someone shouted. Melissa froze, knife trembling in her grip, then fled down the hallway. The police caught her 2 blocks away. They said she'd been planning it for months, obsessed with me from the day I moved in. She had notebooks filled with details about my life. What time I left for work, what I ate, even sketches of my face. She told investigators she wanted to become me. She thought if she wore my clothes, lived in my apartment, even dyed her hair to match mine, no one would notice the difference. Melissa was arrested and charged with stalking, breaking and entering, and attempted assault with a deadly weapon. She was sentenced to 10 years. I moved out of that apartment the very next week. But sometimes when I'm walking home at night, I still feel eyes on me, still hear her voice whispering in the back of my head, "If I can't be your neighbor, I'll be you." I've always believed that the quietest neighborhoods can hide the darkest secrets. When we first moved into the little cul-de-sac on the east side of Pinewood, it felt like we had finally found a safe, permanent home. The kind of place where kids could play in front yards until the streetlights came on, where neighbors waved from their porches, and where the loudest noise at night was the hum of the crickets. It was March of 2001, and my husband Adam and I had been married for 11 years. Our oldest child, Lucas, had just turned 8 and was in 2nd grade. Then there was our 4-year-old daughter, Emily, and our youngest, 2-year-old Noah, who clung to my hip like an extra limb most days. We'd been renting a cramped townhouse in the city for years, and when Adam's uncle passed away and left us a small inheritance, we knew exactly what we wanted: space, safety, and a slower pace. Pinewood wasn't a bustling city. It was a mid-sized town, maybe 20 minutes from the nearest real downtown area, surrounded by stretches of farmland and long, wooded back roads. We ended up buying a modest single-story home on the far end of a dead-end street. It wasn't fancy. Beige siding, a little porch, a yard that needed work. But it was ours. The kind of home I thought my kids would remember fondly when they were grown. For the first 6 months, everything was blissfully ordinary. Our days fell into a routine. Lucas would walk to the bus stop 2 blocks away. Emily would go to preschool 3 mornings a week, and Noah stayed home with me. We made friends with a few neighbors. Mrs. Carter from across the street, who baked pies for every holiday, and the Johnsons next door, a quiet couple in their 50s who always kept to themselves but never failed to wave hello. Then, one Friday morning in early October, I noticed a moving truck parked in front of the vacant house at the very end of our street. It wasn't unusual for houses to sell, though in Pinewood, it happened slowly, one family at a time. But I'll admit I was curious. The house had been empty for almost a year. Its overgrown hedges and peeling paint had made it the ugliest on the block, and the idea of new owners fixing it up was exciting. I stood at my kitchen sink, rinsing dishes, watching through the window as 2 men unloaded furniture. One was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in worn jeans and a black hoodie. The other was slimmer, moving boxes more than furniture. A beat-up green sedan was parked behind the truck. The sedan's driver door was open and a woman sat inside, her face half hidden behind a curtain of dark hair. She never got out. Not once. New neighbors? Adam asked that night when he got home. Looks like it, I said, handing him a plate of dinner. Didn't see any kids. Just, I don't know. Something about them felt off, Adam chuckled. Off how? I hesitated. I don't know. They didn't talk to anyone. Didn't even wave when I went to get the mail. And the woman in the car, she just sat there staring at the house, like she didn't want to be there. Over the next week, I learned the tall man's name was Dale from a quick overheard exchange he had with Mr. Johnson. The slimmer man was apparently his younger brother, Shane. The woman I still hadn't seen up close. And despite moving in, they kept mostly to themselves. The blinds in their windows stayed closed day and night. It was the kind of thing you notice when you live in a small neighborhood. Everyone else's homes felt open and alive, but theirs felt shuttered. Things started small. Lucas came home from school one afternoon and mentioned that Dale had been standing at the corner by the bus stop. Maybe he's just waiting for a ride, I told him. Lucas frowned. He didn't say hi, he just looked at me. 2 days later, Emily, who loved riding her tricycle up and down the sidewalk, came running inside saying, the man with the dark hoodie was standing by the mailbox, watching me. That's when my unease turned into a knot in my stomach. I started paying closer attention. When I'd take Noah out to the yard to play, I'd sometimes spot Dale leaning against his car, cigarette in hand, his eyes fixed on our house. Not casually glancing, fixed. The moment I met his gaze, he'd turn away, walk inside, or start fiddling with his phone. One Saturday, I decided to introduce myself properly, hoping maybe I was just imagining things. I walked down the street with Emily holding my hand, a plate of fresh banana bread in the other. Shane answered the door, glancing over his shoulder before opening it wider. Hey, I said with a smile. I'm Rachel from up the street. Just wanted to welcome you guys to the neighborhood. He took the plate without smiling. Thanks. Is Dale around? I asked, trying to be friendly. His eyes flickered toward the stairs behind him. Nah, he's busy. And then, without another word, he shut the door. I told myself maybe they were just private people. Maybe they'd had bad experiences with neighbors before, but the feeling in my gut didn't go away. The real turning point happened on a cold Thursday afternoon in November. The air smelled like wood smoke, and the sun was already sinking low. Lucas was due home from school any minute. I was folding laundry in the living room when I heard a knock. Rapid, frantic, almost panicked, at the door. I opened it to find Mrs. Carter, her face pale and eyes wide. Rachel, you need to come now. What's wrong? I asked, my pulse spiking. It's Lucas down the street. There's a man. She broke off, shaking her head. I think he was trying to get him into a car. I didn't think. I dropped the laundry, ran barefoot out the door, Mrs. Carter right behind me. Halfway down the block, I saw it. Lucas backed against the fence, his backpack hanging off one arm, and Dale standing beside that beat-up green sedan. The passenger door was open. His hand was on my son's arm. Lucas, I screamed. My voice cracked, but it made Dale's head snap toward me. Adam, who had just pulled into the driveway minutes earlier, saw me running and followed without hesitation, yelling, "Get away from him!" Dale didn't move at first. He just stared, his eyes dark, cold, and utterly empty. It made my stomach drop. I'd seen unfriendly eyes before, but never ones that looked like they didn't care if they destroyed you. Then, as if deciding something, he gave Lucas a shove toward the fence, got into his car, and slammed the door. Before he could drive off, Mr. Johnson and his brother appeared from their backyard, cutting him off in the street. "You're not going anywhere," Mr. Johnson barked. Dale revved the engine, glaring at each of us, then swerved around them and tore off, tires screeching. I scooped Lucas into my arms, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold him. He said he needed help finding his dog, Lucas whispered, burying his face in my shoulder. But he didn't have a leash or anything. And he kept telling me to get in the car so I could see a picture. We called the police immediately. When the officer arrived, a young guy, couldn't have been more than 25. He listened but seemed almost dismissive. "It sounds like maybe he was just trying to talk to your kid," he said. I stared at him in disbelief. He had the car door open. He had his hand on my son. The officer scribbled in his notepad without looking up. "We'll make a report." They never found Dale. The next morning, the house at the end of the street was empty. No moving truck, no green sedan, no sign anyone had lived there. Even the banana bread plate I'd given Shane was gone. For months after, I wouldn't let Lucas walk to the bus stop alone. I installed locks, motion lights, even a fence. But the part that stayed with me wasn't just how close we'd come to losing him. It was the look in Dale's eyes. The look of someone who saw my child not as a person, but as something to take. Lucas is 32 now, with kids of his own. But I still remember every detail of that November afternoon. The smell of wood smoke, the pale sky, the sound of my own heart pounding. And every time I see a moving truck on a quiet street, I wonder what kind of neighbor's moving in, and if they're the kind who plans to stay. I never thought moving into a new neighborhood would feel like stepping into a nightmare. My name is Emily Carter, I'm 29, and I'd just finished my first year as a marketing manager in Portland. I had recently gone through a rough breakup. My boyfriend Ryan was charming in public but controlling and manipulative in private. After months of emotional drain, I finally ended things and decided I needed a fresh start. That's when I found the small townhouse on Maplewood Lane, a quiet street lined with older homes, picket fences, and perfectly trimmed hedges. It was the kind of neighborhood that made you feel like nothing bad could happen. I thought moving here would help me reset my life. The first few weeks were blissful. I unpacked my boxes, hung photos of friends and family, and even started a small herb garden on the balcony. My closest neighbors were a middle-aged couple, the Harrisons, who waved whenever I left the house, and a young man named Lucas, who lived 2 doors down. I only exchanged polite hellos with him, nothing more. But one night, as I was scrolling through my phone after a long day at work, I realized how lonely I felt. I missed having someone to talk to, someone to share a laugh with, even if it was just for a few hours. That's when I reluctantly turned back to online dating. I had avoided it for years, never trusting the pictures or bios people posted. But after a month of swiping, I matched with Zach Taylor on Tinder. His profile was simple. A man in his early 30s, athletic build, dark brown hair, and a genuine smile. His bio read, adventure seeker, coffee lover, looking for someone who laughs easily. Our conversation started slow but picked up quickly. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my cat Milo, and I found myself laughing at his jokes. For the first time in months, I felt normal. A week later, he suggested meeting in person. My heart raced. I hadn't dated in years, and the thought of seeing him was both exciting and terrifying. I suggested my house since my parents were out of town for the weekend. We'll have the place to ourselves, I told him, trying to sound casual. He agreed immediately. On the day of the meeting, I spent hours preparing. I vacuumed every corner, wiped down counters, lit a lavender candle to make the place smell welcoming, and even baked brownies, because nothing says first date like homemade brownies. By 3 p.m., I was nervously straightening my hair and double-checking the living room when a knock echoed through the house. I opened the door and froze. It wasn't Zach. Standing there was a man I had never seen before. His clothes were torn and dirty, his hair greasy and unkempt, and his eyes were sharp and calculating. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Hi, I said cautiously. Can I help you? I'm Zach, he said, his voice gruff and uneven. You're Emily, right? No. Wait, I stammered, trying to mask my panic. You're not Zach. Zach looks different. He chuckled, a low, unsettling sound. Oh, that? Those were pictures of my nephew. He's, better looking than me. Something inside me screamed. I should have closed the door, called the police, run outside. But my polite upbringing and fear of confrontation kept me rooted. Okay, come in, I said, stepping aside reluctantly. The interior of my house felt suddenly smaller, almost suffocating. I gestured toward the couch. Do you want some brownies? I just made them. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes roamed the room, pausing on family photos. My cat Milo perched lazily on the armchair and finally landing on me with a gaze that felt too intense. Sure, he said, voice flat. We sat in silence for the first few minutes, eating brownies awkwardly. I tried to make small talk, asking about his work, hobbies, and what he did on weekends. His answers were vague and sometimes contradictory. The longer he sat there, the more uneasy I felt. I actually need to step out for a bit, I said, trying to buy myself time to think, maybe get some fresh air. He shook his head slowly. Nah, I like it here. His gaze lingered on me longer than necessary. Something about the way he looked at me sent chills down my spine. It wasn't just a stare. It was as if he was trying to memorize every inch of me, every movement. I felt exposed, vulnerable. My heart pounded in my chest. Listen, I said, forcing a calm tone. My parents will be home soon. I think maybe you should go. He stood abruptly, and that's when I saw the glint of metal in his pocket. My breath caught. "I could have killed you today, Emily," he said with a crooked smile, pulling a small pocket knife from his pocket. "But I'm not." Yet I froze. Words failed me. My brain raced, calculating escape routes, dialing 911, anything, but my voice caught in my throat. He chuckled and walked toward the door, then paused. "You're pretty brave for letting me in." Before I could react, he left, slamming the door behind him. My hands shook so violently that I had to hold onto the kitchen counter for support. I called the police immediately, reporting a suspicious person at my home. They took my statement, promised to patrol the area, but nothing ever came of it. Zach never contacted me again. The days that followed were worse than the encounter itself. Every time I heard a car engine, a knock, or footsteps near my house, my pulse spiked. I installed extra locks, cameras, even motion sensors. I barely slept, and when I did, nightmares of his eyes and that knife haunted me. Even my neighbors noticed. Lucas, the young man 2 doors down, knocked one evening. "Hey, Emily, you okay? You look shaken." I just had a weird experience," I admitted, forcing a laugh. Nothing to worry about. But it was hard not to worry. Every time I left the house, I felt someone watching me. Every shadow seemed too sharp. Every reflection in a window felt like eyes staring back. Months passed, but I never forgot. Sometimes I thought about confronting him if I ever saw him again. But deep down I knew that curiosity would be fatal. I stuck to real-life interactions after that. Coffee shops, work events, neighborhood meetups. Online dating was off the table forever. The memory of that day on Maplewood Lane stayed with me, a chilling reminder of how quickly trust can turn into terror. It changed me, made me cautious, made me wary, made me aware of the darkness that could exist behind a simple swipe. And sometimes, when I walk past my front door at night, I swear I see someone watching from the street, a silhouette in the dark, waiting. I never see the face clearly, but the feeling of being observed is unmistakable. It's been a year since that afternoon, and I still lock every door, check every window, and triple-check my phone before answering messages from strangers. I've learned the hard way. Some dangers aren't obvious, and some people are not what they seem. Even now, when I close my eyes at night, I can feel those eyes, watching, waiting, and I know, if he ever comes back, I'll be ready. But part of me also wonders if he's already been back, watching quietly, waiting for the right moment. I never thought moving into that old double house on the corner of Lincoln Avenue would change the way I looked at people forever. At the time, it felt like the right decision. Rent was cheap, and after splitting with my job in Ohio, I needed somewhere new to start fresh. My boyfriend David and our 2-year-old daughter Lila came with me. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. The double was nothing fancy. 2 units, thin walls, peeling paint. But we made it feel like home. I hung Lila's drawings on the fridge, stacked my thrifted mugs on the shelves, and tried not to mind that our neighbors kept to themselves. On one side, an older couple. On the other, a middle-aged man named Carl and his girlfriend Patty. I never spoke more than a hello to them. The first few months passed quietly enough. I worked part-time at a laundromat down the street. David did handyman jobs here and there, and most of our days revolved around Lila. We didn't have much, but we were happy. That's probably why I ignored the uneasy feeling I sometimes got when I caught Carl staring too long from his porch, or when Patty would abruptly stop talking as soon as I walked outside. It started, the way these things always do, with something so small you almost convince yourself you imagined it. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, the kind of day where the breeze feels soft and the sidewalks hum with kids' laughter. We decided to walk to the corner store, just 10 minutes away, to grab some snacks. Lila was bouncing in her stroller, clapping her hands at every passing dog. We weren't gone more than 20 minutes. When we came back, I froze at the front steps. The lock looked wrong. The paint around the knob was scraped, deep dents in the wood, and right in the middle of the door was a smeared, blue-gray streak. David leaned closer. "That's fresh," he muttered, pressing his thumb to it. "Somebody tried to get in." My chest tightened. In broad daylight, I glanced at the back door, the same blue marks, and right above the knob, the faint shape of a boot print. Who would... I started, but David cut me off, ushering me and Lila inside quickly. For the rest of the evening, I couldn't shake the thought. Whoever did it knew we'd only been gone a short time. which meant they were watching. Over the next week, the uneasiness grew into something sharper. I found the bathroom window latch broken. My bottle of dish soap, usually balanced neatly by the sink, was cracked open like someone had dropped it hard. Random items, my curling iron, Lila's toy blocks, had this strange oily residue on them, slick and chemical smelling. One night while folding laundry, I whispered, "David, does it feel like stuff keeps moving?" He sighed, rubbed his forehead. "Yeah, I thought maybe I was just losing track." We weren't. The moment that cemented my worst fear came a few nights later. I went out to toss the trash in the alley dumpster. When I lifted the lid, I froze. Inside was a short metal rod, one end wrapped in a washcloth, a torn blue glove tied over it. My stomach dropped. That was it. The same tool that had left those blue marks on our door. Something in me told me to check the neighbor's dumpster too. Against my better judgment, I peeked. I almost collapsed. Inside their black trash bag were my things. My old car title, which I kept hidden in a duffel bag in my closet. A few of my clothes, some makeup, even little kitchen items. My chest pounded as the back door creaked open. Patty stepped out, saw me by their trash, then turned to yell inside. A second later, Carl appeared in the doorway, shirtless, his heavy frame filling the frame, his pale skin slick with sweat. He stared at me like I had crossed a line. I forced the words out. "I know you've been in my house." Carl smirked. "I didn't steal anything." His tone was mocking, dismissive. "I swear to God, Carl, if you step foot in my house again..." My voice broke. I didn't even recognize the words coming out of my mouth. "I'll burn your house down." His grin widened. He didn't look scared. He looked amused. I called the police. 2 officers came, listened to me, then ambled over to Carl's porch. They spoke to him and Patty for less than 5 minutes before returning. "Nothing we can really do," one officer said, handing back my ID. "No proof they stole anything." I wanted to scream. "Proof? Their trash bag is full of my stuff." He shrugged. "Could be a mistake. Keep your doors locked." And then they left. Within minutes, Carl was outside, phone pressed to his ear, grinning at me like he'd already won. It happened so fast. Headlights swept the alley. Cars pulled up, 5, maybe 6 of them. A lifted truck rolled in last, blocking our own car in the driveway. David stepped to the window, his face drained. "They brought people." I peeked over his shoulder. Men spilling out, voices loud, heavy boots hitting the pavement. One man wore a tank top, gold chains glinting under the streetlight. In his hand, a gun. My heart slammed against my ribs. I shoved a chair against the back door just as someone rattled it hard. "David!" I screamed, scooping Lila up. She laughed, thinking it was a game. The back door thudded again. Voices shouted outside, getting closer. I didn't think. I bolted for the front, David right behind me. As we reached the porch, a deafening pop cracked the night. A gunshot. I shrieked, clutching Lila to my chest. "Please, no!" Feet pounded around the side of the house, shapes in the shadows. But somehow, we made it down the street, around the corner, lungs burning. I don't know how we weren't hit. The police came again, lights flashing. They combed the street but claimed they found no evidence of gunfire. They wrote a report, took down our statements, but their voices were flat, detached. I begged them to wait while I grabbed clothes. They agreed, standing outside. Inside, I ran to Lila's room. The smell hit me first, sharp, chemical, sour. On the carpet, on her tiny clothes, on her diapers, weed killer. A whole gallon emptied. I staggered back, gagging. They had been inside again. While we ran for our lives, they broke in and poisoned my child's belongings. I grabbed what little was untouched and fled. That was the last night I slept in that house. We moved across town within days. Nothing ever came of it. No arrests, no charges, not even a follow-up call. Some nights I wake up in a sweat, heart pounding, sure that Carl's smirk is waiting in the dark. I dream of blue marks on doors, of oily residue on toys, of running with Lila in my arms while shadows close in. The scariest part isn't what happened. It's what never got answered. Why us? How many times were they inside, watching us sleep? And why, even after police stood in front of our door, did no one care enough to stop it? Those questions keep me awake more than the memory of the gunshot. Because in the end, it wasn't just our neighbors who failed us, it was everyone. And I'll never get closure. I never thought moving away from my family would feel so liberating, and at the same time, so dangerous. When I first left my parents' home in Dublin 2 years ago, all I wanted was a clean break from the constant arguments, the suffocating tension, and the way every small thing, what time I came home, who I was texting, whether I left a light on, turned into a war. University in the UK was my escape, a new country, a new city, and the freedom to just breathe. My first year in student halls was almost everything I imagined. I had my own small room, met people from different backgrounds, stayed up too late watching films, and spent way too much money on takeout. More importantly, I discovered what independence actually meant. Not just paying bills or cooking pasta, but being able to choose who I surrounded myself with. That year, I also met Aaron, the guy who would later become my boyfriend. We weren't serious at first, just a lot of laughing, staying up until sunrise and being stupid together. But slowly, without me realizing, he became my anchor. By the time second year rolled around, I was ready for a bigger step. Some friends and I decided to rent a student house instead of staying in the halls. It was nothing fancy, just a terraced house on a quiet road near the town center. I picked a ground floor bedroom at the back of the house. The window opened into a tiny yard with a crooked wooden gate that led out to the alley where we kept the bins. Not bad, eh? Aaron had said when he first helped me move in, dropping my box of books on the bed. Not bad at all, I said, though the truth was the gate already bothered me. It was flimsy, with a single latch that looked like it hadn't been changed since the 80s. We tied it shut with some string to keep it from blowing open. But still, I noticed it every time I stepped outside for a smoke. The neighbors on our left were a quiet family who mostly kept to themselves. On the right, though, that was another story. The house looked the same as ours, but the guys living there were older, late 20s, maybe 30s, and they didn't act like students. They threw loud parties in the middle of the week, shouted at each other at 2 a.m, and once, I swear I heard glass smashing followed by someone yelling in a language I didn't understand. At first, I brushed it off. Students drink, people fight. It wasn't my business. But then something happened that made me realize just how wrong things were next door. It was late September, just a few weeks after we'd moved in, when I was woken by shouting outside. At first, I thought it was drunk people walking home. But when I peeked out of my blinds, I saw flashing blue lights bouncing off the brick walls of our street. I went outside with 2 of my flatmates, curiosity pulling us into the cool night air. On the pavement, one of the men from next door stood covered in blood, his white t-shirt shredded and soaked through. His arm was sliced open in several places, and there was a deep cut across his forehead. Jesus Christ, I whispered. The police were holding back another man in handcuffs, shoving him into the back of a van. I caught the word knife shouted between officers. The injured man staggered, almost falling. Out of pure instinct, I stepped forward. Are you okay? Do you want some help? He turned his head, his eyes glassy but intense. Yeah, love, just... Can I come inside? Clean up? Something about him unsettled me. His grin looked forced and his hands, sticky with blood, kept twitching. But I couldn't just leave him bleeding on the street. Against my better judgment, I brought him into our hallway. Bathroom's that way, I said quickly, pointing. He smirked, looking me up and down. You're kind. Most people wouldn't. One of my flatmates fetched an old t-shirt for him and he muttered thanks while dabbing at his wounds. But the whole time his eyes wouldn't stop drifting to me. He leaned closer at one point, whispering, You've got pretty hair. Bet your boyfriend doesn't appreciate it enough. I froze. Okay, I think you should head home now, I said firmly. He chuckled, muttering something under his breath before stumbling back outside. That was the last time I willingly spoke to him. For a while, I managed to avoid him. I'd see him smoking on the curb sometimes when I walked to class, but I kept my head down. Until one day he approached me outside the corner shop. Hey, love, he called, walking straight toward me. I pretended not to hear, but he blocked my path. His breath stank of weed. Why you ignoring me? Thought we had a connection. "I've got to go," I muttered, trying to sidestep him. He grinned, his teeth yellow. "No worries. I'll just wait at yours, yeah? We can talk there." I froze. "Don't." But he was already walking toward my street. My chest tightened. I called Aaron in a panic, but he wasn't home. When I turned the corner, sure enough, there he was with one of his flatmates, sitting on my doorstep like he owned the place. I couldn't face them. I lingered near the shop for almost an hour, heart hammering, before they finally wandered off. Only then did I sprint home, lock the door, and collapse on my bed shaking. After that, things escalated in ways I never imagined. One evening, I went for a smoke in the yard and noticed the gate was wide open. The string we'd tied was slashed clean through. My stomach dropped. None of my flatmates had been outside that day. "Aaron, I don't like this," I told him over the phone. "Then don't use the yard," he said. "I'll help you fix the latch properly when I'm over." But even after we replaced the string, it happened again. Open gate, string cut, always at night. The shouting from next door grew worse too. Sometimes it sounded like furniture being thrown against the walls. Sometimes it was just endless screaming. We called the council once, but nothing came of it. Then came the night that still keeps me awake. Aaron was staying over, asleep beside me. He's the heaviest sleeper I know, but suddenly around 3 a.m. he shook me awake. "Shh," he whispered. "Do you hear that?" I held my breath. At first, nothing. Then whispers, faint, low voices coming from the yard. My blood turned to ice. We both sat up slowly. Then came the sound of the gate slamming open. Wood banging against the brick wall. Footsteps crunched on the gravel right beneath my window. I had left it cracked open because of the heat. The voices grew louder. One of them rattled the handle of the back door. Soft at first, then harder. "Don't move," Aaron breathed. I gripped his arm. My curtains were drawn, thank God, but I could hear them right outside, close enough to touch the glass. Then unmistakably, the sound of my window being pushed wider. I swallowed a scream. One of the men muttered something in a language I didn't understand. The frame creaked as they tried to force it open. That was it. Aaron grabbed my hand and whispered, "Go, now." We bolted, no shoes, no coats. Just grabbed my phone and ran out of the room, out the front door and down the street. I called my flatmates, telling them to lock their doors, then dialed the police with shaking fingers. The patrol car arrived in under 5 minutes. By then, the men had scattered. The officers caught one in the alley, armed with a kitchen knife. The other was found a few streets away, high and laughing like nothing had happened. When the police raided their house, they found meth, heroin, and more knives. One of them was sentenced to 2 years in prison for intent to cause harm. But none of that erased the image in my head. My window sliding open, the whispering voices, the knife in the dark. Even now, back home in Dublin, I wake at the slightest noise. Sometimes I dream of footsteps in the yard and wake up gasping. Aaron tries to comfort me, saying, "It's over. They're gone." But I can't stop thinking, what if he hadn't woken me that night? What if they had made it inside? I don't think I'll ever fully know the answer. I never thought my second year of college would leave me more afraid of going home than walking across campus late at night. Looking back now, I realize the warning signs were there from the beginning. I just didn't want to acknowledge them. When I didn't get a dorm after freshman year, I scrambled for off-campus housing. The school's student housing office gave me a short list of places still available, but most were either way out of my budget or already full. Out of desperation, I ended up in a cooperative housing community on the outskirts of town. It was like 3 old Victorian-style houses grouped together on a block about 15 minutes from campus by bike. It wasn't ideal. The houses were drafty, the plumbing was questionable, and there were too many people crammed together for comfort. But it was cheap, and when you're a broke college student, that's usually all that matters. Most of the residents were students. Like me, sophomores, juniors, a handful of seniors, but there were exceptions. A couple of grad students lived there, some teaching assistants, and even 2 guys in their late 20s finishing degrees. They had paused years earlier. But the one who stood out most to me from the first week was an older woman named Miriam. Hale. From what I could tell, Miriam was in her late 50s, though she looked older. She had shoulder-length gray hair that was always a little unkempt and walked with a stiff limp, as if her back or hip had never healed from some old injury. She rarely spoke to anyone, and when she did, it was with this strangely flat tone, as though she was repeating words she didn't really mean. Most of the time, she just had this blank, unblinking stare that made my skin crawl, even when I told myself not to be judgmental. I assumed she had some kind of connection to the university, maybe a faculty member taking advantage of cheap housing, or maybe an alum who had been allowed to stay, but nobody seemed to know. And when I asked about her early on, the most common answer I got was a shrug. The first time I saw her do something that unsettled me was in the common kitchen of our house. The other two houses each had their own kitchens, so I wasn't sure why she was there at all. A bunch of us were cooking one night, music playing from someone's speaker, everyone chatting and laughing. And there was Miriam, just standing silently in the corner. Not eating, not cooking, not saying a word. At first I thought maybe she was waiting for something, but after a while it became clear she wasn't doing anything at all. Just standing, watching. I caught her eyes once across the room, and I couldn't tell if she was looking at me or past me. But when I turned away, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was focused on me specifically. What made it worse was that nobody else acknowledged her. Not a glance, not a hello, nothing. It was like she wasn't even there, even though she was only a few feet away. That night when I mentioned it to one of my housemates, a guy named Eli, he just shrugged. She does that sometimes. Best to ignore her. Everyone else does. That doesn't bother anyone else? I asked. Eli gave a little laugh. You're new here, you'll get used to it. I didn't think I would. A week later, I was working at my desk when I glanced out my window and froze. Miriam was standing in the middle of the street outside. It was almost midnight, the street lamps buzzing faintly, and there she was, motionless. Her head tilted up at my window. She wasn't on the sidewalk, she wasn't walking by, she was just standing in the middle of the road, staring up at me. It was late October, the temperature had dropped, and she wore only a thin cardigan. I couldn't imagine she wasn't freezing, but she didn't move. My first instinct was to duck out of sight, but for some reason, I don't know if it was nervous politeness or just my dumb habit of trying to be nice, I raised my hand and gave a quick wave. The moment I did, I regretted it. Instead of waving back, Miriam's face twisted into this strange, almost childlike grin. She jumped up and down twice like she was excited, then turned and ran clumsily toward the house next door. I sat frozen at my desk, my stomach in knots. By waving, I had confirmed something I wasn't ready to admit to myself. She had been watching me, and now she knew exactly which window was mine. The next morning over breakfast, I asked another housemate, Nora, about her. Do you know much about Miriam? I tried to sound casual, though my voice cracked. Nora raised an eyebrow. Why? I don't know. She's just kind of strange, that's all. I saw her outside last night. She's always been here, Nora said almost dismissively. Everyone just leaves her alone. Don't make it a big deal. That doesn't answer my question, I pressed. Nora sighed. Look, she's connected to the housing somehow. I think she's like an alum or something. Maybe she helps out, I don't know. People say she's harmless. I wanted to believe that, but harmless people didn't stand in the street at midnight staring into students' bedrooms. One night I left my room to grab water from the kitchen, and when I opened my door, I nearly collided with Miriam. She was standing right outside my room. I physically jumped back, my hand slamming against the doorframe. Jesus Christ, she didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't even look surprised. She just turned and limped down the hallway, silent, as ever, as if I was the one who had intruded on her. It left me rattled. I lay awake that night staring at the door, listening for footsteps, terrified she might come back. Over the next 2 weeks, I started noticing her more and more, in places she shouldn't have been. The laundry room in the basement, the stairwell, late at night. Once she was crouched in the garden out back, her face hidden by the branches until she slowly lifted her head and met my eyes. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that she was just eccentric, maybe mentally unwell, but not dangerous. But then I lost my room key. Every bedroom in the houses had an old lock, a relic from when the buildings were hotels decades earlier. Most people didn't bother locking their doors, but I always did. When I realized my key was missing, I tore my room apart searching for it. Nothing. I was pissed, mostly because it meant I had to go to the hardware store, get a copy made from the spare, and spend money I didn't have. But deep down I was unsettled. A few nights later I woke in the dark to a noise, a soft, rhythmic bump. At first, half asleep, I thought it was something outside, but then I realized it was coming from my closet. Every 20 seconds or so, there was a faint shifting sound, like something brushing against the door from the inside. I froze in bed, listening, my pulse hammering in my ears. After a full minute, I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and forced myself up. I wasn't going to lie there all night imagining things. I crept to the closet, took a deep breath, and in one sudden motion yanked the door open. What I saw made me scream. Miriam was inside. She was crouched low, her wide eyes locked on mine. One of my neckties was looped around her throat like a necklace, and in her right hand she clutched a kitchen knife. My scream startled her. She lurched forward, the knife flashing in the dim light. I screamed again, this time in raw fear, and instinct took over. We collided, the knife skittering across the floor as I wrestled her down. She was frail, her body light, but she fought like an animal, scratching, biting, thrashing beneath me. I yelled for help, my throat raw. Doors slammed open in the hallway. My friend Eli burst in first, then Lee, one of the older students. Together we pinned Miriam to the floor, her screams turning guttural, almost inhuman. "Call the cops," I shouted, my voice cracking. Someone did. The rest was a blur. Blue and red lights flashing outside, police swarming the hallway, Miriam handcuffed and dragged away. When they searched her, they found my missing key in her pocket. The truth came out slowly in the weeks after. Miriam wasn't an alum. She wasn't faculty. She wasn't supposed to be there at all. She was the property manager's sister. He had let her live in one of the unoccupied rooms without telling anyone, trying to keep it under the radar. She had severe, untreated mental health issues, but instead of getting her the help she needed, he hid her away in the co-op. When everything came to light, the manager was arrested for negligence, among other charges. I wanted to feel relief, but mostly, I felt sick. Sick that I had waved at her that night, sick that she had chosen me, sick that I had been asleep while she crept into my room with my own key. If Eli and Lee hadn't gotten there when they did, I don't like to think about what would have happened. I graduate this spring. People keep telling me I'll look back on college as the best years of my life. But when I think of those years, I don't think of parties or classes or football games. I think of the blank stare of the woman in my closet. I think of how easily I could have been killed in the place I was supposed to call home, and I know I'll never truly feel safe living next to strangers again.